The snow fell like forgotten prayers, silent, endless, and cold. A monk named Tenzin swept the frozen courtyard of an ancient monastery buried in mist. He heard the mountain breathing, and then, beneath the silence, something else. A faint whisper rising from the cracked stone floor, as if the earth itself were remembering. He leaned closer and found an old scroll sealed beneath ice, its silk faded, its ink trembling like a pulse from another age. His heart pounded. Could this be a prophecy the elders feared to mention? The one said to appear only when the world began to lose its truth. The wind howled, carrying a voice that asked, "When wisdom sleeps, who will wake it?" The wind carried voices that did not belong to the mountain. They whispered in syllables older than language itself. Tenzin clutched the frozen scroll, feeling warmth pulse beneath the ice, as though it were alive. Fear and wonder tangled in his chest, for he knew the monastery forbade touching anything that bore the seal of silence. The prophecy was not meant for the living, the elders said. It was the breath of an age that should never return. Yet the boy's heart trembled with a question louder than any command. If truth is forbidden, can silence still be holy? He hid in the prayer hall, behind a giant bronze Buddha, whose serene face seemed to watch him breathe. The scroll thawed slowly in his hands, the silk edges curling like petals, awakening to light. As the letters appeared, his lips trembled, not from cold, but from recognition. The first line read, "When words lose meaning, men will call confusion wisdom." The flame before him flickered violently, and the bronze face seemed to change, smiling, but not kindly. Was this revelation or warning? Footsteps echoed outside, heavy, hurried, fearful. The elder monks searched for him, calling his name, their voices sharp with authority. Tenzin pressed his back against the cold metal statue, heart thundering like a drum in a storm. He could hear the monks whisper, "He's seen the forbidden light." For a moment, he wished he had. The prophecy had awakened something in him, a knowing that could never be unlearned. When the door creaked open, he closed his eyes and whispered, "Forgive me, teacher." When the monks left, silence returned, but it was not peace. The boy unrolled the scroll completely, and a single tear slid down his cheek as he read the final line. "When seekers forget what they seek, the Dharma will walk disguised among fools." A distant rumble of thunder rolled across the peaks. He looked toward the open temple door where snow fell like ash. The prophecy was not a warning from the past, it was a mirror for the present, and it had chosen him to see. The message traveled faster than wind. A boy had uncovered the lost prophecy. By the time the snow melted, the rumor reached the golden court of Queen Amara, who ruled a kingdom trembling between faith and fear. She sat beneath a jeweled canopy, her face calm but her eyes restless, like a lake hiding a storm. When the monk's tale was told, silence filled the hall. The queen whispered, "If this prophecy speaks truth, then even thrones must fall." Her voice quivered not from doubt, but from recognition. That night, Queen Amara could not sleep. She walked through the moonlit garden where frozen lotus ponds reflected her sorrow. The stars above looked distant, indifferent. "How fragile is power," she murmured, "when truth dares to awaken." Her reflection trembled in the water, as if mocking her peace. She wondered if the prophecy had found her, not through the boy, but through her own fear. By morning, her fear had turned to command. "Bring the boy," she ordered, her voice sharp as iron wrapped in silk. Soldiers rode through the mountain pass toward the monastery. The monks tried to hide Tenzin, but destiny had already drawn its circle. As hooves thundered through the snow, the child clutched the prophecy tighter, whispering, "If truth must die, let it die in my hands." The queen's general arrived with torches and steel. The elder monks pleaded for mercy, but the orders were clear. No forbidden prophecy shall remain. Flames devoured the library, scrolls turning to ash that danced like spirits in the wind. Tenzin ran into the burning hall, shielding the one scroll that mattered. Amid the roar of fire, he heard the Buddha's silent voice. Even truth must pass through fire to become light. When the smoke cleared, only ash and silence remained. From her distant palace, Queen Amara watched the rising plume on the horizon, a dark flower blooming against the snow. "It's done," she said, but her voice broke like thin ice. She turned away, believing she had silenced prophecy. Yet somewhere beyond the mountains, a boy walked into the unknown, carrying not just a scroll, but the seed of truth that fire could not destroy. The mountains faded behind him. The wind no longer carried prayers, only the smell of smoke and hunger. For years Tenzin, now 16, walked from village to village, carrying the hidden scroll in a wooden case. He saw temples turned into markets, monks trading mantras for coins, and kings blessing wars in the name of peace. Every place he went, people asked for miracles but feared truth. One night, beneath a dead tree, he whispered, "Is this the age of confusion the prophecy spoke of? Or is it just us?" He entered a famine-stricken village where mothers offered rice to idols made of mud. The air reeked of despair. A starving child tugged at his robe, asking, "Can prayer fill an empty stomach?" Tenzin knelt beside him and shared his last piece of bread. "Prayer feeds the soul," he said softly, "but kindness feeds both." The boy smiled faintly before falling asleep in his lap. That night, Tenzin realized the prophecy was not only about kings and temples, it was about hearts forgetting compassion. Days passed without speech. He began to understand that silence itself was a teacher. In the wilderness, he meditated beside rivers and dying forests. Once, as he sat under a storm, lightning illuminated his reflection in the water. Half boy, half monk, and something older than both. The rain fell like truth, washing away illusions. He no longer feared the prophecy. He was becoming part of it. One dawn, he reached the ruins of an old temple overtaken by vines. Inside, faint carvings told stories of a golden age, when people saw truth as light, not burden. He ran his fingers over the crumbling walls, whispering, "You once knew." The wind stirred the leaves in reply. He placed the scroll on the altar and bowed deeply. May the Dharma hide until the world remembers how to listen. That night, as he left the ruins, a wandering pilgrim crossed his path. A gray-haired man, humming an ancient chant. "Where are you going, child?" he asked. Tenzin smiled faintly. "Wherever confusion leads me." The old man laughed softly. "Then, you are already walking toward truth." Their paths parted in silence, and the wind carried away the last echo of laughter. For the first time, Tenzin felt no fear of losing the scroll, for he had already begun to live its message. Years turned like prayer wheels in the wind. Tenzin, now 40, wandered the same roads he had once crossed as a boy, but the world had changed. Cities had grown where forests once whispered. Monks argued about enlightenment while beggars starved outside their gates. One evening, he sat before a cracked mirror in an abandoned shrine and unrolled the scroll for the first time in decades. The letters shimmered faintly as if alive. He whispered, "Show me what I failed to see." And the ink began to fade, leaving only his reflection staring back. As he watched, words emerged again. Not on the scroll, but inside his mind. The prophecy is not a warning of what will come, but a mirror of what is. He remembered the greed of kings, the fear of monks, and the silence of the hungry, miweni, shimi. Every sin he had seen outside now lived quietly within him. The age of confusion was not a future age. It was the blindness of every moment when truth is forgotten. He bowed his head and whispered, "The prophecy never spoke of time. It spoke of me." Outside, Thunder rolled through the valley. Tenzin stepped into the rain, lifting his face toward the storm. He felt no fear now, only freedom. The prophecy had never sought to curse the world, but to awaken it. Each drop that struck his skin was a truth returned. He laughed, softly at first, then louder, until the storm seemed to echo him. "Confusion is only truth wearing the wrong name," he whispered. When the storm passed, he returned to the shrine and placed the scroll within a clay jar, sealing it with wax and prayer. He left a message on the wall. "Truth returns to those who stop seeking it." Then he turned toward the path leading east, toward the kingdom he had fled long ago, not to warn them, not to teach them, but to understand what fear had done to compassion. At sunrise, he began his journey down the valley path. Mist curled around his feet like memories. As he walked, he passed a dying tree covered in prayer flags, the same one he had seen as a child. He paused, smiled, and whispered, "The prophecy never left me. It only waited until I could read it without fear." The wind stirred the flags gently, and in that sound, he heard the laughter of the universe, soft, patient, eternal. The kingdom had changed beyond recognition. Temples had turned into fortresses, monks wore silk instead of cloth, and beggars bowed before golden statues that no longer listened. Tenzin, now 40, walked through streets paved with the dust of forgotten prayers. He saw merchants selling relics for coins and priests blessing weapons before battle. He whispered, "When truth is sold as gold, the Dharma hides in dust." The prophecy had come alive, not in heaven, but here. Word spread that a silent wanderer was quoting forbidden verses. Soldiers dragged him to the palace. Before the throne stood Queen Amara, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes hollowed by sleepless nights. When she saw him, she froze, for his face was familiar, like a ghost remembered. "You," she whispered. "You survived the fire." Tenzin bowed. "Fire never kills truth, Your Majesty. It only burns what tries to hide it." That night, Amara summoned him in secret. In the quiet of her chamber, she confessed, "The prophecy, it has haunted me. I burned it, yet it burns in my dreams." Tenzin looked at her with compassion, not blame. "Prophecy doesn't curse us," he said. "It only shows what we choose to ignore." Tears welled in her eyes. "Then show me what I ignored." He held up a mirror, old, cracked, and silent. "Look," he whispered. Before dawn, the city erupted. The people, driven by greed and fear, rose against their rulers. Temples burned, gold melted into rivers of fire. From her balcony, Queen Amara watched her kingdom dissolve into chaos, the very confusion she once tried to destroy. Tenzin stood beside her, calm amid the screams. "You cannot stop the prophecy," he said softly, "but you can end its illusion." She turned to him, trembling. "How?" "By not fearing what must end." When the dawn came, the city lay silent, ashes glowing faintly like dying stars. Queen Amara walked barefoot through the ruins and laid down her crown before Tenzin. "The prophecy was not about a kingdom's fall," she said. "It was about the fall of pride." Tenzin placed his hand on her head and whispered, "And the rise of truth." As the sun rose over the smoke, the wind carried the same ancient whisper that once echoed through the snow. "When wisdom sleeps, who will wake it?" The wind no longer carried prayers, only echoes of languages long forgotten. A lone scholar, 50 years old, walked among the ruins of a vanished kingdom. His robe was gray, his eyes heavy with quiet curiosity. He searched not for gold or relics, but for meaning. In the cracks of fallen temples, he found fragments of script burned into stone, the same words Tenzin once protected. "When wisdom sleeps, who will wake it?" He did not know why that line made his heart tremble. as if an ancient memory had stirred beneath his ribs. That night he camped beneath the ruins. As the fire crackled, he opened an old notebook and copied the faded carvings. The letters glowed faintly in the firelight, almost alive. He whispered, "If these words are prophecy, why do they speak only of confusion?" A voice seemed to answer, not from the dark but from within, because confusion is the first step to remembering. The fire flickered, and for an instant he saw a boy's reflection in the flame, a young monk sweeping snow. At dawn, he wandered deeper into the valley and discovered an ancient shrine carved into the mountain. Inside, dust covered everything, except for one clay jar still sealed with wax. His hands trembled as he broke the seal. Inside was a silk scroll, half faded, but unmistakably alive. He read aloud the first line, and the earth seemed to sigh. "When truth is sold as gold, the Dharma will hide in dust." Tears filled his eyes. "Who wrote this?" he whispered. The wind replied softly, "You did." As he read, visions flooded his mind. The boy in the snow, the queen in her palace, the burning temple. The scenes overlapped like mirrors reflecting through time. He realized he had lived these moments before, not in dream, but in spirit. The prophecy was not about a single age, but the endless rebirth of ignorance and awakening. He whispered, "Every soul carries the prophecy until it remembers its own light." He left the shrine at twilight carrying nothing. The scroll remained behind, safe in silence. He no longer needed proof, only peace. As he walked through the valley, a gentle rain began to fall. The wind carried the same whisper that once followed him through lifetimes. "When wisdom sleeps, who will wake it?" He smiled faintly and replied, "Perhaps this time. The children will." Generations passed. The valley forgot its monks, its queens, and its wars. Grass grew over ruins, and the wind spoke only to those who still listened. One morning, a 10-year-old girl wandered through the remains of the mountain shrine, chasing butterflies through dust and sunlight. She tripped on a berry jar and opened it with small, curious hands. Inside, the ancient scroll lay sleeping, silent, waiting. As she touched it, the wind sighed through the valley, whispering words no one had spoken for centuries. "When wisdom sleeps, who will wake it?" She unrolled the scroll and squinted at the faint letters, unable to read the old language. But something within her smiled. She felt warmth in her chest, as if the air itself were remembering. In that silence, the world seemed to pause. Birds stopped mid-song, leaves hung still, and even the light softened its touch. It was as though the mountains themselves were listening again. Behind her, an old traveler approached. The scholar, older now, frail, his hair silver as snow. She turned, and he smiled without speaking. "What is it?" she asked. He looked at the scroll and whispered, "A mirror that once frightened men, but now only reflects light." She tilted her head. "Is it yours?" His eyes softened. "It belongs to whoever still listens." They sat together until dusk, speaking little. The girl asked simple questions. The old man answered with silence. When the last ray of sun touched the scroll, she looked up and said, "What does it say?" He smiled faintly and replied, "It says nothing now. The world has already begun to remember." Then he closed his eyes, and the evening wind carried his final breath into the mountains. When morning came, the girl was alone. The scroll rested where the light first touched it, glowing faintly in dawn's silence. She rolled it gently, placed it back inside the jar, and whispered, "Sleep again. Old truth. When the world forgets, I'll wake you." As she walked down the hill, the valley filled with bird song, and somewhere, carried on the wind, a familiar voice asked once more, not in warning but in peace, "When wisdom sleeps, who will wake it?"